there any apologies or absence, Ben?
Yes, there are, yeah. We've got apologies from Councillor Rosshaw, Councillor Mason, Amir Hussain, Asma Iqbal, Bobby Thandy, Alan Williams, Simon Wright, Peter O'Brien, Nick Plant and Simon Mellon.
Okay, thanks very much. Just a few words from me before we start. First, welcome to all the new members. I know that quite a few are here, and a few apologies. The Combined Authority went through a recruitment exercise. My apologies that I could not be there. I would have loved to have been there, but Andy Wright, my deputy, did a fantastic job with Liz, so thank you very much, Andy, for all the hard work. What might be an idea for the information for new members? We'll just quickly go around the room, and if the new members want to just say a few words, don't have to say too much, but don't go on for too long. But that it might be good just to sort of have a quick introduction. So, Ben.
Hi, yeah, I'm Ben Kearns. I'm the Governance Services Officer for this committee.
Andrew Wright. I'm on the left.
Deb Hetherington, Bruntwood SciTech, the UK's largest property developer for science and technology businesses. I'm also an associate at Leeds Beckett University, co-founder of Women in Leeds Digital, a director of the Leeds Digital Festival, and sit on the board for the Leeds City Digital Council.
Good afternoon, my name's Paul Price. I lead IBM UK Ventures, covering UK and Ireland.
Hi, I'm Farah Butt. It's actually a shortened version of Farhanda Hussain Butt, which has many more syllables than you might care to pronounce. I was a teacher for 25 years at secondary school, head of English. We then got dragged into joining the family business, but I've started doing it willingly for the last 5. The business is an award-winning bed manufacturing company, and it's also 25 years old. I'm also a governor at Kirklees College, and I sit on the Dewsbury Town Board with Shabir, and I've worked on the manufacturing task force with Andrew and a few other people around this table, including Mandy. So I've sort of made that transition from education to business. That's it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Derek Whitehead, Principal and CEO of Leeds College of Building and representing West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom Purvis. I'm an Economic Analysis Manager at the Combined Authority.
Hello everyone, I'm Phil Witchley. I'm Head of Business, Innovation, Skills and Culture Policy at the Combined Authority.
Hi, I'm Henry Rigg. I'm the Head of Business Support at the Combined Authority.
Hello, Kate Thompson, Head of Economic Implementation at the Combined Authority.
Sarah Bowers, I lead on Innovation Digital Policy for the Combined Authority.
Jen Robson, I lead on Economic Resilience for the Combined Authority.
Carl Oxford, Director of African and Caribbean Business Ventures, and great to see you again, Deb. Good to see you.
Hi, most people know me. I'm Martin Booth. I'm Managing Director with UK Group, also Chairman of the CKMA Coverdale and Kirklees Manufacturing Alliance. I also sit on the Skills Board, the Nuclear Board, and I also just been taking part with the Mayor's Manufacturing Task Force.
Hi, Sam Langdale. I'm from an SME manufacturer based in Harrogate called Synthetech, and we make robotics for the gas industry.
Councillor Eric Firth, Cabinet Member, Kirklees Council.
Councillor Jane Scullion, Deputy Leader of Calderdale Council.
Brian Archer, Director of Economic Services at the Combined Authority.
And Liz Hunter, Interim Director of Policy and Development at the Combined Authority. And just to reiterate, if we may, with the microphones, we might be able to hear you, but it's to enable the cameras to kind of locate where you are. So if you wouldn't mind turning it on and off once you've spoken, that'd be super. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. and Thank you, Liz. The reason why we have to press the button is, my understanding is we are live webcast, and for the purpose of transparency and accountability to the taxpayers out there, we're doing our little bit. So I'd really appreciate it if you can just press the button when you're speaking. So we've got 7 new members. A few of them aren't here, but Asma Iqbal, Deborah Hetherington, Farah Butt, Paul Price, Simon Langdale, Bobby Tandy and Alan Williams. And it's really, really good because it's completely refreshing to see new members come forward and bring new ideas in, and actually challenges are probably now greater than we've seen over the last few years. There's a chair's update later on, which I'll cover a few bits, but what we'll do is we'll just carry on the agenda. Any declaration of interest or pecuniary interest? If any members have got any interest, I'm assuming that you have a form that you can complete. Either give the form to Ben during the meeting or after the meeting. Also, there's an exempt item at item 12, and you'll see it in your packs under the Local Government Act. We are allowed to take items of confidentiality in private session, and what we've got is the items at the end. So anybody who is here from the media or elsewhere who should not be in the meeting, please leave at that point. I'll just go over that before we go into private session. Item 4, minutes of meeting held on the 29th of March. Are they a correct record? Yes? Is there any matter that are arising that we need to be aware of, that we need to action?
I don't think so, no, that aren't covered in the papers.
Thank you very much. Okay, a chair's update. I was going to do the chair's update and new membership together, but I thought I'd do the new membership at the beginning. We'll also be holding an induction session. Is that already in a couple of weeks' time for the new members of the this committee? And please do attend because I'll be. I think it's already in my diary, and it's important that we actually start to gel as a committee. And I'm so pleased that we're actually not having this on Zoom, because the few conversations I had before we started, there's no way that we'll be able to do that on Zoom. And especially when you have new members, 7 new members, to build them informal networks, you can't do that, because if you want to do that, you've got to actually make a call. It's a task that you've got to do. Whereas if you come in a room like this, you can just hide there and have a chat, and you just can't do that. So I'm really pleased that we are back to normal. And we've got 7 new members, and we can actually start gelling and start delivering for the residents of West Yorkshire. Also, we've got Derek, who is going to be leaving us. Is retiring. You don't look old enough to retire. Principal of the Leeds College Building, and you've been a tremendous asset to this group. And you've represented West Yorkshire Consortium of Colleges and provided great advice and feedback during your time in the cabinet, on the committee. And we'll really miss you, but please do keep in touch. And I'm sure you'll read all about us, the fantastic work we're doing. But once again, Derek, thanks for all the hard work you've done. And it'll be hard to follow, but I'm sure we will try and keep the Combined Authority Committee moving forward. The other item is Manufacturing Task Force. Yesterday, the Mayor's Manufacturing Task Force launched their recommendation report on the Produmax in Baildon. I couldn't be there because daily commitments, but hopefully that won't happen again. I think, Andrew, you were there, so I don't know if you want to just give us a quick resume feedback of how well it went. I've heard a conversation that it went really well. So
it was a good event. Thank you for the chance to say something about it. There were about 40 people there, and we presented the Manufacturing Task Force report, which we've been working on for about 8 months. There's several of us around the table who've been doing that. I gave a bit of an introduction at the beginning, but then the meat of the meeting was a discussion which included Mandy and Farah about each of the 4 missions that are the 4 areas that the manufacturers have said that they want to do combined work with the CA. And then we finished up with a speech from Tracy Browen, which was fantastic. She was motivational, very engaged, and clearly does feel that this work is something that is important to her, and West Yorkshire. So that was really nice to see. Just for the benefit of the new members, the 4 mission areas for manufacturing are productivity, particularly measures of productivity and improving that, and that's where Industry 4.0, automation, all that sort of stuff comes in. Being attractive as an area, getting people to invest in the area and to retain the people that we have in it. Green, so making sure that businesses can get advice on how to go green and that businesses are playing their part in the zero carbon by 2038. And then the last one is training and skills for manufacturing, and we set a big hairy goal there of doubling the number of apprenticeships or access at the early stage into manufacturing by 2030 relative to today's numbers. We're thinking at the moment about how to follow up that, and there's active debate on that, which anybody in this room would be very welcome to join. But we're keen to keep the momentum that we've generated as a group, the manufacturing task group, and link it probably with the Made Smarter work, which this committee already oversees. And there will be, a follow-up that will mean that we continually check against those 4 missions what progress is being made, and no doubt things will evolve as time goes on. It's underpinned by the fact that the manufacturing alliances, the 4 district manufacturing alliances, are coming together under a West Yorkshire Manufacturing Alliance, and that will help very much with coordination and be also part of maintaining the energy and the focus in this area. Okay.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for everybody who attended yesterday. Just a final word from me regarding the meeting today. After item 12, the formal part of the business, there's going to be a private session for members. We're going to get a briefing on the SME Investment Fund. Foresight Group, who's been tasked to help us with this fund, will give us a presentation and opportunity for some questions and some conversations, but that will be at the end of the meeting. Item 6 is governance arrangements. This is a general governance update for information. It just sort of provides information on the structure and how the new recruitment process fits in. And Liz Hunter, who's up to our directors, I'll ask Liz to take us through the report, and any questions, Liz, I'm sure you will be able to shed some light. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a pretty standard paper for this time of year. So the AGM happened at the Combined Authority a couple of weeks ago and agreed the terms of reference, which were attached at Annex Appendix 1 to the report, and also, as mentioned, lists out our new members. So I'm happy to take any questions on the process if anybody has anything, but hopefully this is a fairly usual paper that you're likely to see at this time of year.
It's a procedural matter, so it's pretty straightforward. Can I just have a quick show of hands that we agree? Otherwise, thank you very much, members. We've just seen Sue Cook, who just came in, so we just we just had a quick round of introductions for the new members. I don't know if you want to say a few words, who you are and where you come from. Thank you, Sue. And just for information, we've got 7 new members who are now part of this committee. Asma Iqbal, Deborah Hetherington, Farah Butt, Paul Price, Simon Langdale, Bobby Tandy and Alan Williams. And a few are here, so I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to catch up with them later on. Item 7, economic reporting. Obviously, this is quite an important part of the agenda. Usually I see this, and I've been on the Combined Authority for a few years, and we just get the standard report. But because of the climate we're in, many challenges that are facing us, inflation, just when you think that it's going to slow down, it sort of goes up another 0.5 percentage point, and at the same time interest rates are sort of going up 0.25%. And my son's buying a house, and I'm thinking, Dad, should I buy a house? I said, well, son, when I bought my first house, I think it was 14-15%. So still, historically, it's really low, 1 or 2%. And I said to him, if you don't get the housing ladder now, your money is worth nothing in the bank. And he's got a reasonably good job as well, so I don't think he'll be suffering. But on a serious note, the economy is quite volatile at the moment. But one of the strange things I find is, although we're getting all the indicators going against the economic growth and forecast, unemployment is really low. So it's like completely strange. So based on what happened in the 70s, where inflation and interest rates were high, and unemployment was high as well, we've got a strange scenario where unemployment is low. But anyway, what I will do is, I'm not an expert on this. I don't pretend to be neither. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Tom Purvis, who will take us through this. Tom, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and as I'm sure everyone will agree, the situation right now isn't the best set of circumstances we've ever experienced. So I'll just start with kind of an overview of where we are on the macroeconomy. So what was mentioned was the Bank of England has started to increase interest rates. In June, they voted to raise interest rates from 1% to 1.25%. Now, what you would typically expect off the back of that would be the pound to start strengthening. However, because the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates quicker than the Bank of England are, what we're actually seeing is that the pound relative to the dollar, which is what a lot of commodities are priced in, the pound is actually weakening. So there's kind of a double effect there to keep in mind. And the Monetary Policy Committee, who vote on these things, was split 6-3 at the last meeting in June, with the 3 voting against, voting to increase interest rates quicker rather than sort of putting a step on the brakes. The next meeting is the 4th of August, so that's one to keep an eye on. And you'll also get an update on the Bank of England's own forecast at that point as well, which I'll mention bits of, but given the volatility of the set of circumstances we're currently in, speaking about forecasts that are even a week old, perhaps aren't the wisest. But in terms of where we are with consumer price inflation, so in May they reached 9.1%. That was a 40-year high. The expectations are that it will carry on rising, in part because of the energy price cap. The energy price cap is currently around £2,000 per year on average. However, over the last week, you might have noticed a few different organisations, including Ofgem themselves, talking about where the price cap will go in October, but it will be announced next month. And the forecast seemed to be around £2,800 to £3,200 per year. So that's another large increase in people's spending on energy bills ultimately. And if you look at analysis done by organisations such as the IFS, you've got the people, the poorest kind of 10-20% of society are already spending close to all of their disposable income, or, well, I say disposable, all of their kind of post-tax income on rent and utilities and food. Now, rents are going up, utilities are going up quite dramatically, and food prices are also going up because of what's been going on with regards to the Ukraine war, as well as general supply chain problems across the globe as well. Now, that's the consumer side. On the producer side, there are also problems here and potential for actually further inflation. So we know that producer input prices rose by around 22% in the 12 months to May 2022, up from 20.9% in the year to April. This is the highest rate since records began in the mid-80s. Producer output prices rose by just shy of 16%. So whilst a lot of the cost increases have been passed on, there is still room there for more cost-push inflation, with the main drivers being things that you'll also see in the consumer sector. So it's things like crude oil prices, metal prices, energy prices. And what we're starting to see are those costs being passed on in a big way. In the most recent Chamber of Commerce quarterly economic survey, around 80% of manufacturers and around 60% of service sector businesses expected further price increases to come. So that's another area where it's worth keeping an eye on, and we get updated figures for June, either the back end of next week or the start of next week. So in terms of the labour market then and what that kind of means or where people are. So as the Chair said, we are still performing well when it comes to employment. We're getting a lot of people into jobs, we're getting a lot of people into work, albeit there is still an issue whereby those over the age of 50, whilst they were the fastest growing employment demographic in the build-up to the pandemic, they've also been the quickest to basically leave the labour market and not necessarily return. That could be for a variety of reasons, whether it be caring for people, wanting an early retirement, or whatever it is. So of those seeking work, we're doing well in that regard. However, we've also seen a large increase in work benefit claimants during this time period as well. So whilst it's good that we're getting people into work, it's important that we're able to boost productivity and boost wages whereby they're not reliant on in-work benefits, albeit part of that data is increased, if you like, by policy changes as well. But even before the policy changes came into effect, there was a large upswing in in-work benefit claimants. In terms of what what's been going on in the world of pay, if you like. So we saw that pay levels increased by around 5.2%, so still lagging inflation by quite a margin. In Wakefield, they went up by 5.9%, Bradford 5.7%, Calderdale 5.4%, Kirklees 4.8%, and Leeds 4.2%. In the Chamber of Commerce Quarterly Economic Survey, we basically asked the question of what are you expecting wage levels to do over the next 12 months? And they expected a wage growth over the next 12 months of around 6.5%, which would still be a real-term pay cut for people out there unless inflation starts coming down pretty dramatically, which most forecasters agree isn't going to happen. So pay will continue to lag inflation, and that's part of the reason why the Bank of England is particularly reticent about the state of the economy going into Q3 and Q4 this year, because we're an economy that relies incredibly heavily on consumption. If wages are down and budgets are getting squeezed, consumption on other goods, whether it be going to the cinema or whatever, will be reduced. And that could be a problem that compounds over a period of time, particularly if energy prices don't come down anytime soon. In terms of vacancies, so similar to the national picture, vacancies are running incredibly hot right now, suggesting that there is a labour shortage out there. The most in-demand vacancy, if you like, is for programmers and software development professionals. But what we've seen between April and May was a large increase in job adverts in the hospitality sector. Now, there needs to be further analysis into this, whether it be a case of people are setting up businesses that might have gone under during COVID, or people are job moving essentially out of the hospitality sector elsewhere, and that's led to the large increase in vacancies. But vacancies did go up by just shy of 30% in the hospitality sector. So the state of the economy is, as the chair said, pretty strange right now, whereby the labour market is pretty tight, but wages are still lagging inflation. Inflation is running incredibly hot right now. And if you look at productivity figures that were released last week, albeit that there's a lag, we're still behind the English average, with some areas within the Combined Authority increasing productivity quicker than the national average. But then you've got areas, I believe Leeds only grew by 1.1% in terms of productivity versus 2% nationwide. So if you want to get long-lasting wage increases without the inflationary risk that can come with it, productivity is the area to focus on. Just one final thing to flag before we can go into questions is around footfall data. So this was something that I've mentioned previously, that we're working with a company called CityLogic to look at how footfall trends are changing across 13 different zones in the region, so that we can start to look at whether the economic recovery might be happening in one place but not the other. And we started to get data on that. So you'll see under 2.10, there's just a kind of a snapshot of seven different zones there, and you'll see that in, say, the White Rose zone, for example, in March last year, footfall was at the index of 100. By December last year, it had over doubled. But then equally in, say, Crown Point, footfall barely changed across the course of the year. And what we know between March 2021 and 2022, footfall went up by around 28%, which is obviously good news. And this is across all zones. However, it's still 26% below March 2019 levels. So compared to pre-pandemic levels, we've still got some recovery to go. But the general trajectory is one of progress, albeit the economic situation is A, vastly changing, and B, seemingly progressively getting worse for things like footfall and consuming services and goods as well. So that's the sort of state of the economy as we are. As I mentioned at the start, the situation can change pretty quickly. We'll get an updated set of forecasts from the Bank of England next month. The Treasury run a regular survey of forecasters. I think the panel is around 20 or 30 forecasters who their general position is that GDP growth will be minimal and inflation will be somewhere between 10 and 12% before it starts trending back downwards. And they're expecting inflation to return to its 2% target by back end of 2023, Q1 2024 at the earliest. So we could have another 12 months of higher than the Bank of England's target, basically. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please let me know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions, comments, observations from any members? Monday?
All right, thanks for that report. It's really, really good to see all that data, although a bit depressing. One of the things that is worth noting is that whilst there is a price cap for individuals, there isn't for businesses. And so businesses, especially in manufacturing where we're heavy users of energy, are disproportionately affected by that and may need more support. It might be an opportunity to make sure that we use some of the resource efficiency audits that we have under our sustainability banner to try and help those businesses to reduce their power usage, and also maybe gain some more green traction.
Thank you, Mandy. Deb?
Hello. You mentioned the footfall, particularly around Crown Point and White Rose and consumerism. Is that taken into account movement of people online for consumption purposes?
Thank you. No, is the short answer. So essentially how this works is it looks at where people kind of start their journey and where people go to. So it's heavily so it's just tracking kind of physical purchase, basically, albeit if you look at so there isn't sub-regional data on online consumption, but if you look at the national picture, obviously there was a spike during COVID, in part because there had to be, but that has also, the growth in online shopping has calmed down a bit, and that's in part because, you know, people are just doing kind of less, say, Amazon shops or wherever else they might shop. We are starting to see, and even prior to the recent increase in inflation, you did see a bit of a tail off of the growth of online shopping. I think in part because some people probably have always shopped physically until COVID, and then part of it is probably when everything kind of felt like it was going back to normal, it was nice to get out of the house, I guess. So even before the recent bout of inflation, you did start to see a tailing off of the growth of online shopping. Thank you.
Sue?
Thank you. I support that point about tracking the online retail side, because I think particularly we've got those kind of companies scattered around the region, Bite Direct, PC Specialists and Kirklees, for example. They are potentially beneficiaries of that, so it'd be good if there is a metric that we can look at to track the online shopping side of things, given that shift. But I particularly wanted to show a bit of concern about some of the disparities between the districts, and Kirklees in particular, obviously where we're based, is lagging behind, particularly on pay and also on that vacancy rebound figure. So I think that's a bit of a concern for us to keep an eye on, in terms of not all districts are picking up those pay and vacancy benefits. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yeah, part of the reason why we include a kind of snapshot of the different local authorities is to understand that West Yorkshire as a whole might be kind of tracking the national average, but we know that within West Yorkshire there are pretty wide disparities. So if we're going to use the language of, say, levelling up as is often used at the national level, it's important that we also consider the inner combined authority inequalities as well.
It might be worth taking a broader view of what's happening within Europe to get some kind of outlook on what might happen in the future with Germany, with rationing underway, with France, with the privatisation of EDF, reliance on 80% of gas is probably going to be supplied to Ireland from UK. Coming the winter, there's going to be great competition for gas supplies, for example.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. And going back to a point I made kind of right at the start around currency movements as well. As of either today or the back end of yesterday, the euro and dollar at one point reached parity, which people that don't speak in economic lingo, €1 is $1 basically. And as I said earlier on, the pound has been weakening against the dollar. Forecasts are by no means suggesting that suddenly £1 is going to be worth $1. But we're seeing in Europe quite a lot of the inflation is being driven by the euro being weaker. Now that's obviously good for some companies, but less good for others. And where you're heavily reliant on importing, particularly energy, it's a major problem. And as you say, there are certain countries that are already having to look at and start to think proactively around either rationing or alternative energy supplies to get through the winter. Obviously, at this point, when the weather is pretty warm, it's easy to forget that actually how much energy demand increases over the winter. And just something to go back to, and it speaks to your point as well, Sue, around inequalities, is whilst the price cap is expected to be between £2,800 and £3,200, because the price cap relates to kind of per unit rather than an overall yearly figure, you'll have certain groups of people that will inevitably end up with fees far higher than this if they're on, for example, prepayment meters, or if they've got a health condition, for example, that requires them to stay warm, or if they've got bad insulation or whatever, they'll ultimately use more energy. So you'll start to see some major equality problems as well around the energy price cap going up a further sort of 60% or so, depending on if it's at the top or bottom end of the forecast.
Thank you. Brian, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just thank you, Chair. Just to highlight to colleagues a discussion that took place at the Employment and Skills Committee. I mean, the issue of soaring energy prices came up, and it's a particular problem for training providers and the colleges in particular, put in a request for us to look at adult education budget funding rates, which have not increased since 2013. Obviously, given the backdrop of 9% inflation and soaring energy prices, officers took away an action to bring a paper back to look at revising the funding rates for the adult education budget to help mitigate some of those increases. In addition to that, obviously in business support services in Henry's area, we've got programs like Rebiz where we can help businesses improve their efficiency, so at least we can do something to mitigate the soaring energy prices. But it's a particular challenge for those energy intensive businesses, and yeah, we're obviously in for some heavy weather sailing ahead, I think, on that economic front. Thank you.
Derek? Yeah.
Just first of all, thank you, Brian, for that. And although it's obviously because West Yorkshire Combined Authority have the devolved budget now, that's really helpful. If there could be any increases for the colleges and providers, of course. And you know, just to say that, like everybody else, our energy bills across the sector have gone absolutely berserk, really, to be fair. And although we budgeted for double or more, it's even higher than that, really. And basically we've got to cut our cloth accordingly, like everybody else has around the table, which then has an impact on training across the sector. But it goes wider than just adult provision. It's also apprenticeship provision and 16 to 18 provision. Although we've had a slight rise in 16 to 18 provision, we are expected to deliver another 40 more hours on top of it. So, you know, not necessarily a good rise, but, you know, we welcome any increase, really, from the college sector. Thank you.
Eric.
Thank you, Chair. And though it's nothing that this committee can do about, it's just think about what's going to be happening in our schools all over West Yorkshire. And it's unaffordable for most schools out of their budgets. So what will happen? Maybe they'll start sacking teachers and teaching assistants, because that's the only way they'll be able to pay the bills. So it's total chaos is looming, I'm afraid. So it won't just affect manufacturing, because it's got to. They can pass the prices on to a degree, but those little businesses that support them all over West Yorkshire, all over the country, if nothing's resolved, and it's well out of our control, maybe well out of this government's control, a lot of those are going to go to the wall, and we're facing a dire situation. Sorry, Chair, to add to the gloom.
No, I'll put a chair at the end of this in a bit. Any more questions, comments, observations? Tom, do you want to add anything final? No? Okay, thanks very much. Just to move on from what Eric just said, and I will turn this into a positive, believe me, but there's a crisis in NHS, we all know that. You know, every day we hear the figures are getting worse and worse and worse. There's also a public health crisis and a mental health crisis as well. That's what I mean. On top of that, and again, we've seen this over recent years, that in terms of democracy, there's been democratic deficits in terms of elections have been more about beauty contests rather than substance of a particular government or a particular party. And I'm hoping that we are seeing the end of that. And also, from an international perspective, we're seeing international relations at an all-time low. and you know, the world order as we know it is actually shaking at its foundations, and that's where the role of the combined authority comes in, I think, and local authorities like ours, Eric, because you know, we're not going to change the world, but what we can do is through this committee, you know, we've got a very clear agenda, we've got massive challenges, and I think we will be probably at the vanguard of actually making them positive impacts. You know, I think we've got the skills, we've got the ability, and we've got the talent, we've got a new committee, we've got a lot of new members, and we need to now sort of like really step up and actually, you know, drive that change forward. And I was really pleased that Tom said that, you know, the forecasts are by 2023, you know, things will start to normalise. It's going to be a rough ride, but I think we've got the vision, the plans, and the skills, not just in terms of, you know, making that difference to business, but people. You know, that's what this is about, isn't it? People and infrastructure, and we've got a good set of people across the combined authority like yourselves, and we will make that change. So I'm always glass half full. So despite the fact that, you know, everything's falling apart, Eric, you know, we will make that big difference. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 8, investment priorities. At last meeting you had a workshop and you discussed the priorities in terms of moving forward, and I think the committee was circulated what the priorities are, and you've agreed them. So we just want to sort of reflect on that, and I think Phil's here somewhere there. He's going to take us through the report. We'll have a conversation, and hopefully we'll agree to the set of priorities that we've endorsed, and then we can move forward. For Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Let's start being glass half full. So why is this paper here? This paper's here because we as a region have devolved funding through our devolution deal, and in previous meetings of the combined authority and this meeting, we've decided to identify some of that devolved funding over the next 3 years, so £20 million of it, for the area of business innovation and economic growth. And this process that the chair, and for the benefit of new members of this committee, has talked about, we've been kind of working to identify what we allocate that resource to, and that could include continuing things, it could include innovating existing priorities, but we're also operating in an environment, as Tom's described, that is really, really challenging. It was already challenging before the war in Ukraine, and the war in Ukraine's made it more challenging. So how do we use that devolved funding alongside other funding we might get? So things like the Shared Prosperity Fund and funding sources we might not know about yet, or we might be able to lobby for, and how do we organise ourselves based on what we need to do in this region to grow our economy, to support businesses both through the crisis but also into growth. As the chair's mentioned, we've already had a fair amount of engagement on this. So we've had a discussion with this committee back in March to identify what the priorities should be. We've also spoken to local authority leads on economic development, and we've also been developing this alongside some of the things we've been doing, such as the manufacturing task force, such as conversations on the innovation framework, such as the health tech strategy, such as the trade strategy. Before I go on to the table in the appendix, which is the main thing really to talk about here, a couple of kind of cross-cutting kind of principles that I think are important to bring out. I think one of the things we're really, really, really keen, and we've already built into some of the stuff like our enterprise package that we've already in the process of launching and launched, is the need to really focus laser-like on equality in our approach. So making sure that everybody in the region has, and every type of business owner, regardless of their background, has a chance to take advantage of our support, but also looking at kind of how our business support is targeted, and both in terms of who we approach, but also the targets we put to that to make sure that it's representative and we're supporting businesses from BAME owners, women businesses, businesses run by disabled people as well. So that is a kind of key feature. The other key feature I think that we need to kind of make sure is that any approach we take takes the climate emergency into account and looks at that. And we already have some, for example, the Rebiz programme, but I think that's something we need to kind of bake in, particularly given the state of the climate emergency. So Appendix 1 to this report really kind of outlines the approach we've decided to take with this, following all that engagement and what we really want your views on in this committee. I think there's a few things that we're looking at as part of other committees as well that are worth mentioning. It's at the start of this report, but in the Employment and Skills report board, we're looking and having discussions around enterprise and management skills and how we provide that provision. In some of the other committees on green, we're looking at investment in net zero, decarbonisation, and the growth of green businesses. And in the Culture, Sports and Sports Committee, we're looking at the creative sector in particular and how we support that. So some of those things won't appear in this pipeline in terms of what we're doing, but are being developed as part of other committees that some of you are involved with. In terms of the table on this, some of these ideas are more developed, and some of them are things we're looking at developing in the coming months for delivery later on. I don't want to talk too much about some of them because they're later items on the agenda. So Jen is going to be talking about the business support model. So I'll leave that discussion probably for later on the agenda. And Sarah's talking about the innovation programme. So those items are later on the agenda. But in terms of the other things on this table that we're looking at putting forward, they are to kind of address some of the things we talked about in our previous discussions. So we have the productivity programme, which is already being funded, and a business case has been already put forward on this. This is providing grants to support productivity improvements across businesses. We're looking at developing our export support approach, and this is partly kind of been the need to focus of this has been heightened by the nature of EU exit and the nature of trade and the potential that businesses will need to be supported in a different, more so than they have been in the past. So we're looking at that programme. We're looking at using the pipeline to fund inward investment activity to make sure, even in these challenging economic times, we are making ourselves open for business and open for businesses to move to the region and encouraging them to move to the region. And we want to do, like we have done in the past, kind of calls for projects. So this isn't all being kind of public sector driven. We kind of set out the strategic priorities and challenges, but get businesses to kind of bid or outsiders to bid for how they might support against our agendas, and we still want to do that because we think some innovation can come from that. So that's what we're looking at in the short term, i.e. kind of as soon as possible. In the medium term, we are, and these aren't as developed because they're medium term, but they are things we're thinking about. We're looking at kind of development and delivery kind of from next year. We're looking at, and I know Lee isn't here, but we're looking at some ideas he spoke about in previous meetings here about how we might do something together with Innovation UK. To co-invest in knowledge transfer partnerships, so getting that link between universities and researchers and businesses with a focus on productivity, really kind of high up there. We're looking at kind of how we do an enterprise program post-adventure. We're looking at digital transformation, and we're thinking about kind of digital, and I know that many of you are involved in that. We're looking at kind of how we might do something quite innovative around seed corn finance to support those innovative entrepreneurs to get the proof of concept in the early stage of investment. And this is particularly an area looking at kind of equality and diversity, that kind of if you've come from a relatively well-off background, it's something that you might be able to kind of do and develop your business idea, whereas people from wider communities and particularly deprived communities might not have that opportunity, so kind of that's particularly a kind of a focus of that as well as growth. And we're thinking about a range of things around capital support and finance. I've talked for quite a bit there. I think what we're really looking for here is just a view from you about, kind of particularly new members as well, Are these the things that we should be focusing on and should be developing? I think the other thing I'd say is, particularly in light of the previous conversation on inflation, our budgets haven't gone up with inflation, they're static. So we're having to make kind of choices about the size and scale of these and what we do. And it's important to manage expectations around that. But you know, we do have to have choices between these things and emphasis of these things. But we feel like these set of things represent discussions we've had to date, and the focus of what we need to do. But really grateful for views on that.
Thank you, Phil. I've just seen other hands go up, so I don't know who went first, but I'll just take them that way. So Andy.
Okay, I'm very happy to support all of these. They're all good. I think some of them are already linked to things that we talk about already. So I'm thinking about, for example, on the productivity program, the Made Smarter stuff is sort of in that box, but you know, it's there, so that's fine. And similarly, on the enterprise program, we've talked a lot about enterprise support, and I know some of that's falling in the skills bucket, but I guess it's just what I'm saying here is a plea really to make sure that we keep the view on the whole. And with that in mind, three of us here are sitting on the UK Shared Prosperity board, 4 of us, and we'll take it on ourselves, I'm sure, to keep that in mind as we talk on this board. So the good news is it's another chunk of money which will be slightly overseen by this committee, 65 million over 3 years, which is the good news. The bad news is that the European funding that it's replacing was probably about 30% more. So, you know, in relative to what we were able to do, we're going to have to cut our cloth accordingly. So I think, you know, especially for new members, one of the challenges of doing this job is that there's a lot of different strands running, and you know, our job really in this committee is to try and look at that in the round, pull it all together, and make sure that what goes out to the public is understandable and not talking about the what sometimes we call the wires that need to be hidden. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Mandy.
I agree with the proposals in here too, but a couple of requests. One is, as SME champion for the LAP, can we make sure that the grant applications are simple? Because there is a whole industry around applying for grants, especially Innovate grants, and I think that's a waste of money for businesses in this region. And the second thing is, when we're looking at businesses, can we make sure we look at mature businesses as well as startups, which I know we are doing through that. But we also look at businesses and try and improve or select them through ESG as well as through growth opportunities to make sure they're being inclusive and doing all the right things involving schools and they, you know, paying back to the society as well as taking money out of the lab.
Phil, do you want to come in at the end, or shall I just take? It's up to you. Yeah, at the end. Yeah. Okay. Deb, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just totally agree with as a new member, it's really great to see these things being talked about. Just in terms of direct engagement with SMEs, we've got over 100 in platform just over the road, and it's been commented that the Adventure programme, when it goes, there's going to be a huge gap there in business support. So to see that there is talk around a replacement there is really positive. Equally with the digital enterprise vouchers, they're really important to businesses, both digital and those that are looking at digital transformation. For me, though, the most exciting thing there is the seed corn finance. So, huge advocate for EDI, and I think we all talk about the funding gap, and it depends who you talk to what that funding gap actually is. But in terms of getting out there to the wider region and really genuinely engaging with potential innovative pockets, for me, that's a really exciting one. So if I can get involved in that in any way, I'd really love to. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard and then Sue.
Again, yeah, I think great plans going forward. Fully support them. Just on the export support, it is caught in here with regards to utilising other bodies that are around, but I really do strongly support that. And yeah, I work in health tech, as most people know, and Medilink, who are one of the northern sort of supporters, have recently had all their DIT work pulled away. And I think it's an absolute shame. So if this group can really start working with the likes of the Academic Health Sciences Partnership and also people like Medilink, I think it's really critical.
Thank you. Sue?
Thank you. Yes, to add my encouragement and particularly to see the recognition for the work we're doing with Innovate UK on the KTP side. That's very positive, and the acknowledgement for enterprise and leadership and management skills, they're very welcome. The areas I wonder whether have been a bit underplayed, and some of these we might talk about in the paper further on the innovation support programme. It talks about learning the lessons from Connecting Innovation. I also wonder whether we ought to learn some of the lessons from things like Grow MedTech, where there was also great value from a university viewpoint in taking ideas and intellectual property from within universities and finding ways to bring that to commercialisation. So I think there may be a little bit more emphasis on that inside-out model, but we can maybe touch on that in the innovation paper a bit further down the agenda. And similarly, on the Inward Investment Programme, it mentions maybe a particular focus around the years of culture, which is, you know, a great idea. And also, I wondered about, in the same vein, building on some of that health innovation work, particularly the pipeline started by Jen and colleagues, where there's a great pipeline of opportunity and interest there. And so in inward investment terms, I really think we should be tapping into helping those health companies to get started and connected within the region. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Derek?
Yeah, just a quick few points really. One is just whether we're missing an opportunity as well for the continuation of a theme of digital within this, and whether that's been considered. And I was part of the working groups that you'd had before around that. And the other one is just about a mapping exercise of some sort to make sure that we're not duplicating what already might exist out there. So, you know, we're not doubling up on funds really, that particularly when we've got pressures on funding, as has been said earlier really. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Derek. Carl?
Thanks, Chair. And I think, Phil, you win the beauty contest for the best paper so far because of the response. And you mentioned mapping. I think it'd be useful to just mention at this point that we've been doing a discrete project with the Combined Authority, working with Henry and the business team, looking at how some of the key target groups within the inclusive growth agenda are accessing business support. And so, it's very positive that there's a very strong emphasis on EDI and inclusive growth, because osmosis won't do it. We've got to be very pragmatic. So we've identified a target group to interview, which are African and Caribbean businesses, to see to what extent they are aware of the business support programme in the wider business ecosystem in West Yorkshire and accessing it through the authority. And this is stuff that Brian and Henry and others have been around in, for a few decades now. And myself. And no surprise, there was a significant lack of knowledge and awareness of the authority and a lot of the providers. But, by no means, a lack of interest in accessing the support. We've been researching 3 key stakeholder groups, which are the beneficiaries themselves, the providers within the business support ecosystem, including the growth managers, Adventure, and a lot of other groups. But importantly, the intermediaries, those are the informal networks that people go to for advice and support that are not known to a lot of the providers out there, but play a very valuable role free of charge. And bringing all those together, we will have a clearer picture that benefits, the wider inclusive growth interests out there. But it was useful to focus on this group because African and Caribbeans have the lowest startup rate, but unfortunately the highest failure rate in enterprise. So it would be a useful cohort to kind of get a feel for. And we've been informed recently as well by some research come out from NatWest and Aston University, from the Centre for Research in Ethnic Minority Enterprise, that resonates a lot with that stuff about reach and confidence and building relationships. So we look forward to, in the next few weeks or so, no, we aren't meeting again till the autumn, but presenting our findings back to the authority so that it kind of, supports this thinking and future direction.
Thank you, Carl. Any more? Martin and then Simon.
Hi, I'm interested in the productivity programme. and the long-term capital. It's something that this committee started, and Henry and I have put some hours into this. It's good to see it on, but it's now falling between 3 or 4 different committees, and I wouldn't like to see it just be frittered away. It is important for the manufacturing and engineering sector, so that's just a point I'd like minuting. And also for the long-term capital, it's something that engineering and manufacturing companies are desperate for. As the accountants keep saying, most of these companies are sweating their assets. That means they've had them for 30 to 40 years. And if you want
Thank you, Martin. Simon? Okay. Eric?
Yes. All the exciting stuff has tuned me up. But I'd love to find a way of what you're mentioning, Deb, about the Seed Corp funding and all the innovations that's coming from universities. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Because I've been around Huddersfield University and done really wonderful ideas coming from there. So it'd be wonderful if we could connect the two. And other universities, of course, in West Yorkshire.
Thanks, Eric. Simon?
Sorry.
Monday?
I agree with that, and running some sort of Dragon's Den for West Yorkshire using all of the innovation from our universities in some big event, I think would be really great, especially putting them in front of the likes of KPMG and Deloitte. I think that would be at least something that doesn't cost very much, but might actually start something.
Can I just add to that the Dragon's Den sort of pitching was very, very popular at school, so, and I know how much the students got behind that. So I think there's a real opportunity to create the next sort of group of entrepreneurs in our region in this structured format.
Eric?
Just saying, after that, would it be possible for someone to look at the Manchester model and bring it back here?
Yeah, I'm sure Phil will have Deborah.
So sorry, this seems to be going on forever at this point. So I work across Manchester and Leeds, and we actually sponsor the Masood Entrepreneur Centre and the awards, so we're really close to it, so we could potentially have a chat afterwards and push that forward.
Any more before Phil just responds back? Phil, over to you.
Before I respond back, I didn't catch the name of the Manchester Centre from either of you, just that it was in Manchester. Can somebody... Masood. Okay, thank you. So, let's start with that. So, I think we do have something we could probably integrate with this, with the Innovation Challenge competition, which Sarah's going to talk about in a bit. I also think that there's something about a link here. So, I think Martin mentioned lots of things going on across different committees. I think we need to just make sure we don't operate in silos and we link that work across committees. And there is an idea being explored as part of the Employment and Skills Committee about a graduate programme more generally, linking graduates to businesses across West Yorkshire from West Yorkshire universities. And I think they're not the same idea, but they're quite linked ideas. So I think Bradford Uni do something like this, but not this, not focused on innovation, but kind of helping their graduates. So I think it's something we probably need to work with both of you on, but also understand the position of the universities as well and what they might be able to do. So it's a really good shout. So let's pick that one up. Just trying to think about all the rest of the comments. There were quite a lot, but I think it was broadly supportive. Carl, I've never won a beauty competition before. It was always a benefit following The Economist in quite dire economic times. But thank you for that comment. I think on your points, I'm absolutely really keen to understand that research around the African Caribbean business community and how can we kind of shape and develop what we're doing without listening to evidence and listening out the views of communities and trying to work out what works. And that West Aston University thing sounds really interesting, so keen to kind of understand that. We're having kind of a wider kind of working group, which are very and you alluded to it with with what you're saying about Henry and Brian about equality and diversity and how we do business support, and it'd be useful to have your views to that group to understand that. So we'll probably pick that up with you separately. But yeah, really good shouts. Mandy's points. Really good points. I think on the grant point, Henry's going to respond after I finish talking. But anywhere we can make it easier and more straightforward, we'll try to do within the constraints we've got. But we hear that message. In terms of kind of other comments from around the table around keen to support, keen to be involved, I think. We are too. We're keen for you to be involved. That's the point of this committee, about having that link between stakeholders and the business community and the approach we're taking. And you'll see from the other items as we're developing things up, we'll want your views, and I think we'll think about ways in which we involve you and try and get your input from inside and outside the committee. So really, particularly for new members, when we have the new member inductions, we can talk about that and reflect on that. Sue's comments. I think most of them will pick up on the innovation item because they were quite focused on the innovation item. But really good shout on the health innovation alongside years of culture. I think we've got to use everything we have to prove a positive narrative of the region to attract our kind of target businesses and wider businesses to the region. Now, have I captured everyone's comments so far? I really hope I have. I'll let Henry talk about the grant point. And maybe the point Martin made around the productivity programme as well.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I mean, I'm going to play the European card, I'm afraid. Apologies. I feel like I've done that for the last few years. But we are now in a position, as the European funding is drawing to a close, to not have such a prescriptive application process to follow. So I think we're going to be able to be a bit more flexible and a bit more adaptable to business needs. But anything that any of the business people who've applied for grant funding or who've helped their clients apply for grant funding, if there's any feedback you want to give me and my team, that would be gratefully received. But I think we will. I think because the funding sources are going to be closer to home, SPF and Gain Share, we have got the ability to try to make that more flexible and adaptable. Business productivity programme will be hopefully going out to tender this month. What are we on today? It should be this month, to get a delivery partner on board, Martin, to help us support the businesses to develop that productivity improvement plan, and a CapEx grant will probably form part of that, but other interventions may as well, including export, including leadership and management skills, including general skills support. And I think we've probably discussed this point a few times, Martin, but that, particularly with the labour market as it is now, linking grant investment to job creation isn't always going to work for manufacturing businesses. So we are looking at other things that we can ask businesses to contribute, and upskilling their staff, probably the one that we're going to focus on predominantly there. So we're not saying you need to, recruit new staff. You may be doing that, which is great, but in a tight labour market, it might be about how you can develop your existing staff and upskill them, and that can be something that we can support via grant investment. Thank you.
Thank you. So are we agreed in terms of what the paper is recommending in terms of the priorities? Are we okay with that and all the feedback that's come forward? Phil will take that forward. Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much. Item 9 is the future business support model. you probably, well, we've just talked about it. One of the priorities is actually supporting the West Yorkshire business and what sort of framework we work towards. And the business support model really is the evolution of the road service in terms of moving forward. So this paper is really exploring in terms of how we can actually get the early thinking in place, how we can actually get ahead of the curve, and how the committee can actually get behind the priorities and the model, what we're going to be proposing, in a way that coordinates everything we're talking about to actually get that massive better bang for your buck and everything else. Which office is it? That's Jen. Yes, Jen. Yeah, right. Okay. Over to you. You're going to tell us all about how we move this forward.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So we'd like to introduce the concept of Business West Yorkshire, which is a working title because the comms team are going to do a brand review of all our major brands. But the concept is that we put in place funding to support the comprehensive account management and brokerage service to small and medium SMEs. So like the Chair said, it replaces our existing growth services and enhances that further, taking on board the feedback that we've had to make a more inclusive, agile service that can better respond to the needs of businesses, particularly in the volatile economic circumstances that we find ourselves in over the next 12 months and potentially beyond. So the aim is to build on the successes of the current growth service, which has supported now over 20,000 businesses since 2015, and to act as a gateway and hub that is recognisable to businesses, because and part of the reason that we're proposing Business West Yorkshire as the name is to help to enable businesses to recognise the support, because there's been some confusion in the market about the number of business support services available to businesses, and it's been disjointed. We know there's over 900 across the country different support services available, and it can be confusing for businesses to navigate. So one of the things we'd like to do is to make our service as inclusive as possible to everybody, regardless of where they're from in the region and what their background is. So it's based on principles of inclusivity. It will support the existing 16 growth managers and could, in one of the options presented, go up to 21 to enable us to be more agile and to support more companies to become productive and resilient. We aim to reach SMEs across the whole region. We aim to be as quick and flexible to respond to economic challenges and opportunities as possible, and to provide that clarity and consistency to SMEs, which can really enhance them to weather these difficult economic circumstances. And we hope to underpin that by using the latest technologies to support us to segment them and target them and make sure that we're getting the right support to the right kind of businesses as agilely as possible. So that means that we'll probably have 4 core pieces to this service. One is the business gateway, which builds on our successful existing model to ensure that each SME receives the appropriate support and has the opportunity for more in-depth support from the growth managers if necessary. That we continue to support the SME growth managers who are also partially funded by the local authorities to support them to reach a wider number of SMEs in the different parts of the region. To simplify our service, to make it easier for people to get support, and I think that point around making it easier around grant supports has been noted, and part of this scheme is to try and help address some of those concerns, because that has been feedback that we've received in the past as well. And finally, to make it as inclusive as possible through both the service itself, but also through the reach of our events and our general information to the region about business support, so that we are better signposting what is available that's not delivered by us, as well as the services that we can provide, so that it's as easy as possible for businesses to navigate. I think Henry might want to come in with additional points as well, but that should give you a snapshot, hopefully.
Henry, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of quick points to follow on. So there is a slight typo, apologies, at 2.5, where we're talking about the funding that the growth services had from BEIS. It should say reduced growth up funding for 22-23. So the point we're making there is that we have been funded via BEIS for the last 5 or 6 years, and on the 30th of March we got told that our funding for this current financial year was going to be reduced by 50%, which didn't give us a lot of time, 2 days, to try to respond to that and still deliver the service. Luckily we had looked a contingency plan, and the CA had agreed to underwrite some of those costs if that situation did occur. So this is really about trying to be more sustainable with the service moving forward and to fund it from more local resources rather than sort of waiting throughout the year for a decision from BEIS on whether there is any growth of funding. So we may still get some growth of funding moving forward, and of course if we do, we won't turn that down, and we can look at the options there, whether that's replenishing the local reserves and using the BEIS money, or using the BEIS money for another purpose to embellish what we're doing. But yeah, I think that's probably the main point I just wanted to add. I would emphasise the role of the growth managers. I think for all the evaluations that we've done, and we've evaluated the growth service every year since we launched it in 2015, and the overwhelming feedback is that businesses, SME owner managers, like to speak to somebody, they like to have a conversation and build a relationship, and that's the real added value that the growth managers can bring. And just a few quotes there earlier on. At 2.3 that just sort of emphasise the role. It's not just about getting the grants or getting the support. Sometimes it's, particularly in the current climate where it's so difficult and sometimes very lonely for an SME owner manager, it's having somebody to talk to and to sort of unburden a little bit, but also to get some help and direction and to get access to that support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for the report. For new members, they're not blowing their trumpet very hard here, but this work has been evaluated. You just referred to the evaluation, and it has been universally over the last 7-8 years very, very positive. Every pound spent here brings about £25 into the economy. And as you say, people do really, really appreciate it. I think the other stat that I remember from this area is that 20%, during that period, 20% of all businesses in Yorkshire have had interaction with the growth service. So that's 1 in 5. So sometimes we wonder if we really are getting to people. And I think that 1 in 5 figure is quite heartening, really. So that's good. So that the second point is, therefore, obviously, surely this committee absolutely endorses this work and wants to really emphasise the importance, even in this difficult funding environment, of keeping this work going. As you know, I would argue, happy to be told I'm wrong, but I would say this is probably the most important thing we do, and therefore, really, really crucial that we keep it going, even when we have to find money from several different places. There's no doubt we will. And then the last point was just on effective targeting, partly a point coming from the manufacturing task force. I think there's some challenge because a lot of the growth managers are serviced, paid, rationed by local authorities and tend to think geographically in this point. But it would be nice to see a sector approach, and I note that there's going to be maybe more of a customer relationship management CRM approach, and I just wonder whether that could have a sector lens as part of it, which I think would help us to be more proactive. Sometimes we're told that we don't help the people who really need it most because they don't know about us. I think a sector approach would help us to know where to go to be proactive in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Monday.
Sorry to keep chatting. No, I think the report's really welcome and I endorse it completely. I think that one of the metrics you mentioned was the number of SMEs that are engaged with. I think it will be great to have another metric that is the number of SMEs that then engage back. So speak out loud, give case studies, and try and encourage those things. Those things are free marketing for those companies and for West Yorkshire. So if we can make that part of the targets for the growth managers, I think we might get a better network rather than just a transmit sort of thing. I don't mean transmit in a bad way, but you know what I mean. I think that would be really useful.
Thank you.
Again, apologies.
Did you have your hand up?
I did, yeah. I feel like I've always got my hand up today. You mentioned moving towards more of a brokerage type, intelligent brokerage, and ensuring that SMEs are aware of the full spectrum of business support. And one of the things you mentioned, which I'm going to highlight, which won't be a surprise to Sarah, is you mentioned using innovative digital tools to do that. What would that look like? Because one conversation I've had with several people from the Combined Authority is the fact that we are disjointed, and to have an online one-stop shop for this kind of support, and that's the kind of place that people go to before they get to speak to the growth managers, which is absolutely key. Have you thought that through? Is there more behind that?
Yeah, we'll just go around. So, was it your next? Richard, did you have your hand up? Farah. Right, okay, so we'll quick back.
Yeah, sorry, I
So
thought we
Farah.
were waiting for a response from that. Yes, I mean, just to echo, the importance of the growth managers, my particular one, Rachel, is absolutely fantastic and sort of helps us navigate the range of support that's available through there. One thing I was wanting to ask was this Business West Yorkshire, which programmes will this sort of be an umbrella organisation for? Are you able to actually specify that? And secondly, a bit like Deb's, what will the new one look like?
Just to say, absolutely delighted that programme's still continuing. We've used it as a company and it's been really beneficial. I think the interactions I've had, the growth managers are incredibly passionate, knowledgeable, and also that sort of best practice sharing from other businesses, because they do that. They're really embedded in what each company does, which is, I think, can be quite unheard of with this type of service. I'm really pleased that you're simplifying some of the language. I think that will help broaden that more inclusive approach, and use this sort of West Yorkshire business as opposed to other acronyms and things which go right over people's heads and get turned off by it. So my feelings there. And just back to this whole sector stuff, again, use the trade bodies, work with the likes of Medilink or whoever is the right sector specialist, because they have the contacts, they're already working with the businesses. So that makes most sense to me.
Thank you. Sue?
Thank you. Again, I'm a strong supporter of the Growth Service Network. It's the glue that holds the business support ecosystem together, and without that, the rest of it would fall apart, frankly. So it's really good to see the Combined Authorities being proactive and far-sighted in bankrolling the service when the chips were down there, and it sounds as if, in terms of the proposals here, that you're looking to get it onto a more stable footing through a similar method. I've got a question then on the financial implications. Which is, just to clarify then, is what is the cost of this proposal in ballpark terms, and does it come out with the £20 million that Phil mentioned earlier, or is it on top of that? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody on this side? Martin?
Yes, I'd just like to add my support to the growth managers, and I know in Curleys demand is outstripping the resource, so it would be a good idea to combine it.
Thank you, Martin. Anybody else? Anybody want to respond back? Jen or
I'm happy to respond, and I might get Henry to jump in on the bits where I need additional help. So in terms of the sectoral approach, because I'm trying to work around the room, we have discussed, we'll keep the 16 existing growth managers. One of the asks, because we present options, so we sort of present the cheapest option, a medium option, and then a higher cost option. In the higher cost option, we have proposed increasing the number of growth managers with a view that those additional resources can help to increase capacity in areas where we are seeing additional demand, and also perhaps look at sectors or another approach to be able to reach some of the businesses in which we're not currently reaching. So that does form part of the upper ask option, but for the same reasons that you articulated, because we feel that would enhance the service rather than just replicating what we've currently got and giving it some longevity. In terms of tools, this is where Henry might want to jump in, but I know that we're looking at a more a better CRM system as a very basic starting point for this, because the current one's not serving us as well as it could do. But we're aware of lots of other things that we could be doing. So I think it's definitely an area where if people have got experience or suggestions of tools that you think could enhance our knowledge, please do bring them to us, because that helps us to do a more thorough analysis and investigation. Because I think we can't do this all ourselves with the budget that we're asking for either. So we need to be better leveraging resources and tools that are out there. I can't read my scribble there, so I might have to come back to that one. Best practice sharing and simplifying the language, I think, is something that we've noted and is key to what we do, not just on this project, but across the board. It's something that's been sort of high on the agenda for our communications team for at least the time I've been with the Combined Authority. It's something that we're trying to embed into our thinking, so that we make it as simple as possible. One of our values is to be easy to do business with. I think that starts with being easy to communicate with. So we're trying to embed that across everything that we do. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't read what I scribbled down for the other person's question. Did you happen to note it?
Henry, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think
shed some light on the subject any further.
Yeah, just very briefly. Thank you, Chair. I think you asked the question about what Business West Yorkshire, what's going to be in it. At the moment, in Business West Yorkshire is a working title. It's just, we're so innovative that we thought, well, we're in West Yorkshire and we deal with businesses. That's where we got to. That's why we're not in Marcoms. So anything that's currently delivered through the LEP, under the LEP brand, would be part of Business West Yorkshire. That is our thinking moving forward. We would love it if any delivery of support to a business in West Yorkshire, whether that's funded by us or whether it's funded by a different source, say central government, could also come under that banner. But I think we'd have to get into some discussion and dialogue, and you'd have GDPR and all sorts of things there. But predominantly, we're looking now at the things that you would be able to access, say through Rachel, through your growth manager, as being part of that Business West Yorkshire brand, or whatever it becomes, whatever the service becomes. We are looking at a number of different tools. I mean, Bowhurst is one that we work closely with Tom on. That's a really great segmentation tool, and Bowhurst is it's a database service that looks at businesses that are making investments and looks at other indicators for where businesses are sort of in growth mode or potentially in growth mode, which then means that you can target those businesses with growth related products and services. And we will. I mean, Martin will tell you, businesses, and maybe Mandy as well, and others, Richard, there can be a business diagnostic tools to death. Businesses tell me every time you come in there's a diagnostic, and they're all asking the same information in a slightly different way. So we want to get away from always having to do a diagnostic every time you engage with somebody on business support. And the route to that is to have a CRM system, which to start with will be Combined Authority and local authorities, so we can all see all the data that's on there. Not everybody will be able to change that data, and there'll have to be protections in place. But generally speaking, everybody will be able to see, so that if somebody's going to go in and see a business, they can have a look first on a shared system and see who's been in recently, what support was provided, has there been a diagnostic, in which case, can we get some of that information so we don't have to get repeat, and then eventually get to a point where all providers of business support in West Yorkshire are using that same CRM, and whoever's done the diagnostic first can load up that information, and then we don't have to keep asking businesses the same questions moving forward.
Can I just have a quick come back on that?
Yeah, sure.
That's exactly what businesses really need, a one-stop shop where they're not having to repeat things over and over again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I make a quick comment, please? Very quick one.
Yeah.
Very quick one.
If you want to talk, just let me know, because we are public, right? We need to make sure that the public understand what we're doing. And I'm sure there's hundreds of people watching us, if not thousands. So yes, Carl, over to you.
Thank you. Just a very quick point on the issue of tools. In the work that we've been doing recently, under the previous arrangements, there weren't a lot of gathering of EDI analysis. But I'm sure that there's an opportunity now for us to embed that, and so we get some critical information coming through.
Absolutely, Carla. We're doing that this financial year, and collecting that information on the the characteristics of the business people that we're engaging with. And just on the enterprise programme, which again is funded through GainShare, which we've started this year, we're monitoring that information. They're like key KPIs for the delivery partner, and those figures are quite positive at the moment in terms of ethnic minorities, female-run businesses, and businesses run by people who self-certifying as having a disability. I think, Chair, there was a question from Sue on the finances. I don't know. Yeah.
I was going to take that. I'm having multiple hands going from officers. Is it you, Phil?
I'll take it really briefly because I've got a response to Carl's point as well. But yeah, Sue, you make an important point about the finance. We're trying to do all of this kind of without prejudice to where the money comes from, because we think it's more important that we kind of identify what we do. But the plan is, yes, it's coming out of the single investment pot, because the rationale being because we have more flexibility and freedom about how we use that money. And that might not be where we end up, but that's what the plan at the moment. And I think I think that there aren't the kind of options in the paper that Jen alluded to, but we are looking at kind of a range of options between kind of continuing a similar level of investment, increasing the number of advisors, and the other element of this, which Jen's already spoken about, but links to Carl's point, is, and I think really important, for all of us is the kind of the need for continuation, evaluation, improvement, checking what works, pushing out more of what works, and that's part of your point, but it's much broader than that. And I think kind of as next steps, we'll be bringing a more detailed version of this for further as we go through the assurance process anyway, so we'll get more chance to comment on those things. But I think at the moment we're seeking a general kind of view about the direction of travel for this.
So it's around 1 million, I'm guessing.
It's more than that.
That's per year.
Oh yeah, per year, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. No more questions or no more comments or people putting their hands up. So general feeling the growth managers are good value for money. And when I first became the chair, I remember having a conversation with you, Andy, that this is a very critical part of what we do. And I think as we move into these challenging times, I think it's even more critical that we actually get on with this. So the recommendations are on item 10. Which is there for everybody to read. I was going to talk about the typo you mentioned, Henry, and Gandhi came to mind, but that's a different story. Those of you who remember when Roger was leaving, there was something that was said about Gandhi and typo at one of the events that you were having with the Indian embassy or some Indian bigwigs. Luckily, you corrected it, but I don't think it's as high profile with the numbers. But thanks for the report, and once again, thanks for all the comments. We'll move on to the next item. Item 10 is innovation activity. Sorry? Stop whispering.
Sorry.
I've got hypersensitive hearing, so I'll pick up anything. Anyways, this is another priority that was agreed at the workshop in terms of innovation, which is a key priority. And the regional investment programme really is a development of what learning that's already been taking place and building on existing thinking. And what we really need to do is add more value and try and add value from a regional ecosystem point of view. But somebody who's an expert in this is Sarah Bowes. So Sarah, over to you and tell us all about it. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So absolutely, this is building on the current programme of Connect Innovation, which is our current CA programme. Connect Innovation built on its predecessor, Access Innovation. And this new programme is where we believe that we can add value as a combined authority to the innovation ecosystem. It takes a lot of learning from the interim evaluation of Connect Innovation. We've had an awful lot of discussions with key partners through the West Yorkshire Innovation Network and Innovate UK and Innovate UK Edge, who are obviously key players in this space. The programme will work closely with Business West Yorkshire in terms of the diagnostic and signposting of a business who needs support, but this programme will focus on stimulating the appetite for innovation through comms and marketing, providing funding to incentivise innovation activity and connect the ecosystem, which is where we feel we can add value. So for example, this programme will support the future commissioning of other programmes, whether it's around KTPs or other activity. One of the things that is really important about this is including that, as you've already said, Deb, this platform for presenting the innovation ecosystem and the opportunities and the access points. So that's going to be working closely with Business West Yorkshire on looking at what that might look like. So this is really early stage. I've got some early thinking, but really keen to get feedback from the committee at this point. And then the second programme is around CCOM funding, which we've already slightly talked about, and that is even an earlier stage of thinking. But again, if anybody in the committee's got any expertise or interest in getting involved in developing that CCOM funding piece, be more than welcome to get involved in conversations.
Any comments, questions? Sue?
Thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to build on the point I made on the earlier paper. So just to check, so you're talking about this is an in-house programme? I see, okay. Because I think some of the earlier conversations were also about how do we build on the lessons of some of the things that kind of didn't quite work so well with connecting innovation, including that it didn't really achieve the desired effect to build out all the IP and the ideas that could come out of the university sector, where there's clearly a lot of innovation going on, but not necessarily starting with businesses. So it's kind of the other way around. In the way it kind of pops out into being commercialised, and so I just wondered how this new model will help with that kind of tapping into the HEI innovation potential, and whether there's going to be a strand of kind of engagement work that will bring that out in the same way that Grow Medtech did so well within that particular kind of health medtech sector. I just, before kind of throwing that over, I just wanted to sort of commend what was also mentioned earlier about the Employment and Skills Committee also looking at graduate retention, because I think there's also some important opportunities there when you embed graduates into companies, particularly SMEs, to work on business projects, because that's an important ingredient in innovation, so as well as the KTP element that we've already touched on. So I do welcome that, particularly if that's coming through the skills side of the committees. So that was my question.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Simon, any comments? You want to respond back?
So absolutely, the Grow Medtech model, where you embed the academics and the researchers and start from that, is absolutely an option to embed within this. But what we felt was this was the underpinning infrastructure aligned to Business West Yorkshire, and then we can commission further products to align to this as we move through. So in that second column of the table of investment priorities, things like KTPs, and working through how we might do a great number of KTPs in the region, or short KTPs and pilot things like that. Given the funding constraints, the enormous amount of priorities, where do we best focus our efforts? But welcome feedback.
So this is a more kind of scaled back version then, I guess, accepting that the Innovate Edge programme will do a lot of that work for, well, not for free, but because it's already paid for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any more hands up or any more questions being asked. So are you okay to endorse the plans for Innovation West Yorkshire to proceed and be further developed? Thank you, colleagues. Item 11 is Digital Skills Plan. This was developed by the local Digital Skills Partnership, and there's 4 priorities in this: social digital inclusion, workforce for the future, SME and third sector growth, and simplifying the digital offer. I think the way I look at it is this is the employer's voice, and I also understand there's going to be an update that's going to be bought for in summer, and it'll aid SME transformation to become more digitized, if that's the right word. I made that up. I also understand skills committees that actually had a good session on this, and there's been some excellent feedback. A very diverse group of people were engaged. The TUC has also had a look at this. And I think there's some slides that we can email later on, or they're part of the pack. But somebody who's actually been heavily involved from this committee is Mandy. So Mandy, you chair the local skill digital partnership. So do you want to say a few words, and then we'll ask officers to provide some information?
Thank you very much, Councillor Pandora. And I think Business West Yorkshire is a much catchier name than the local digital skills partnership, which I have to say every time I do anything in here. So this is the start of a conversation. There is a plan in the pack, which I hopefully you've all read, and we intend to be working on this a little bit further with your help The Mayor's really keen to make this impactful, so we need to get some action into this plan on top of what we already have. So I'd love to garner your views from that. But I think if we look at the background to it, this morning I bought my train ticket on an app. I FaceTimed my daughter to check she got home all right last night, checked my business bank account online, and then looked at the productivity in real time in my business. Digital skills are essential to everything we do these days. And so the LDSP was brought together during the pandemic as part of the devolution deal to look at skills provision, a testbed for offers, and growing a network on digital skills, and also to support the mayoral pledges of prioritising skills and training and supporting and championing local businesses. And so the team that was put together was a huge team, actually, involving lots of businesses, but including the STEM organisation, the NHS, the Good Things Foundation, local colleges, Channel 4, Lloyds, Tech UK, PwC, Be the Business, Big Issue, lots of private companies and regional governments. So chairing that was on Zoom was a challenge in itself, but fantastic engagement from lots of different stakeholders. The vision of the LDSP was to create a fully inclusive society and thriving economy through the growth of digital skills for everyone. But why? Well, there's three things to look at: people, businesses, and the landscape. So if we look at our people first, 23% of adults in Yorkshire and Humberside have no essential digital skills for life, and 7% are digitally excluded. That means they can't complete a single foundation digital task, for example, turning on a device. If we look at businesses, almost 40% of business leaders are not confident to lead their business into the digital world. So it's no surprise that Yorkshire and Humberside is the lowest region in England with high digital capability. And 40% of people in employment have no essential digital skills for work, and 9% don't even have foundation skills, which means they can't use the address book on their email. Over 80% of all jobs now require basic digital skills. And even when we look at those businesses with higher digital capability, digital professions have the highest prevalence of skills shortages. I think it was mentioned earlier about software developers, for example. So the digital learning space, when we look at the landscape, is complex and fast moving. And there's lots of courses with varying eligibility criteria, timeframes, cost modes of study, support levels and qualifications. So we pulled out four main themes. The first one, social digital inclusion, so looking at data poverty, connectivity and accessibility. Secondly, the workforce for the future, so aligning business needs with the education offer and provision in West Yorkshire. Thirdly, the SME and third sector, so how can we increase their digitisation and essential digital skills of their workforce? And finally, how we simplify the digital offer, the current and future landscape. So the questions really are about how we take the start of the plan, whichever you pack, and develop that further into deliverables with impact. But we need your input to that too. This is going around a number of committees. And we need to remember that we haven't got huge funding, and basics can make a difference. So we need to work with some of the things we already have in place and some of the basic ideas that will make a difference. So what I'm really keen to know is, in that pack, which of the actions would you prioritise? What would you add that isn't in there already? And what are your thoughts on the next steps? So I hope you've read it. And if you haven't, quickly have a look and let me know what you think.
Thank you, Mandy. Is there an officer that's also,
No,
or was that it? Right, open. Well done. I was just amazed that in this report you said 4% remain offline.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if I remain offline for a second, I feel like, oh God, what's happening? Anyway, questions or comments? Carl?
Sorry, Mandy, I couldn't see it in the pack, but you mentioned we have the lowest kind of participation rate in digital skills in England or the UK? Or?
In England.
In England.
Yeah.
And did your analysis identify where those key areas were? Because it might be a kind of Pareto 80-20 thing where quite a small segment might be contributing to that big deficit.
I think it's pretty much everywhere. I think generally in digital skills we have holes throughout the whole of the landscape. There is lots of provision in place, but it's something that we need to simplify. I mean, if you look at 40% of business leaders are not confident about leading their businesses into a digital world, then it's not surprising that their workforces are not digitally competent. So
I'm just thinking with like limited budgets that, you know, a clearer picture as to where the key issues lie might help with more accurate targeting.
yeah. And we have done that work, and some of it is in the pack, but maybe we can pick that up.
Yeah,
offline.
sorry I couldn't
Yeah.
see it in the pack, but yeah. That's
Jane?
Thank you. I thought it was great, actually. Shocking in many ways, as people say, in terms of the numbers, really, of people without basic foundation digital skills, really quite shocking. And, you know, a call to action for us as a combined authority. I thought there was a very good link, and that possibly could come out a bit more in terms of the link with innovation.
Yeah.
Really, because actually, you know, those digital skills and the workforce digital skills are one of the things that can lead to innovation. But I also liked very much, and I suppose it's a call to other documents that we see in the committees, is the bits of narrative and the bits of lived experience and testimonials really brought that to life, actually. So I really commend it. It's excellent.
Oh, thanks, Councillor Scullion, that's great. I think you're quite right about innovation. Innovation is part of the solution. It's also understanding, as Carl mentioned, what is missing and trying to plug some of those gaps quickly. But I think there's a huge opportunity. If you look at the Conference of the North, it showed the figures in terms of the step up in different regions of the country in terms of digital skills, and the Northwest have had a huge increase in digital skills. Now I know it's not a competition, but I am competitive, and I'm gutted that we haven't done better than that. So I think one of the things we need to look at is why the Northwest have been so successful with their programmes. And maybe we can learn something from that.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, I really support the idea of no individual will be left behind. I just wonder whether the spoke model and the advisors, is that commensurate with the need? I just have a nasty feeling that we might be doing something very worthy and very good, but not really getting as much done as we need to get done. Is that something that's been thought about? Is it correctly scaled?
That's not something that I have detail on. Phil, can you help with that question? Marianne's not here, I don't think, is she?
No, she is.
Oh, she is. Marianne,
Yeah.
can you help with that? Sorry. Yeah.
Can you repeat that point, Andrew? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just asking whether the provision that we're proposing, is it really likely to be able to hit the objective of no one left behind? Have we got enough in here?
I think we have to be pragmatic based on the resources we've got, but it's a really good question. I think we have to look at how much of it we can hit with the resources we've got and how we lobby for more resources to get that issue.
I'm trying to sound positive because I really feel this is one of the most important things, isn't it? And so, you know, really making sure we've given this a decent push is sensible.
I think there's an interaction between this and the Skills and Employment Committee and how much we identify in the Skills and Employment. Some of you sit in the same committee. And how much we identify in the Skills and Employment Gain Share Pipeline and Shared Prosperity Fund to this, which I think is a challenge which affects kind of all society and all businesses. Yes. So it's not just about, it's one of those things that doesn't just affect kind of business growth, but also affects social inclusion. So I think it's something that should be a priority, but it's also about, I think, how we try and be bold and innovative, and because there's something about the existing provision that's not working in the way to get all of this, but what is the answer? Is it more money, or is it more money and a bit of innovation? That's something we're trying to work through at pace at the moment.
And maybe there are other examples out there we could draw on too.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think one of the things that's worth pointing out is the speed of change. So if you look, when I was a kid, I had to take the lead from the phone into the cupboard under the stairs to speak to a potential boyfriend. And then 20 years later, I had a car phone. And then 10 years later, I had a mobile phone. And soon we'll probably have a chip under our skin. And so you would have looked at digital skills maybe 10 years ago and said that actually as the population moves on, then everybody will become digitally compliant. Unfortunately, technology is moving faster than we can keep up with. So it's not just about solving the problem, it's about managing to solve that problem at pace so that we start to pick up some of the issues that we're facing.
Do you want to come in?
Yes,
my concern would be the sort of digital excluded groups, and I think we really do need to focus on those. I think it's great. There's no way that this is going to be halted, and the speed at which it's going to continue, etc. But I think we're going to leave behind, just picking up your point, I think there'll be certain groups that we already are probably aware of are going to get left behind. Those who are going to be data deficient. Certainly if I think about my parents, the elderly, etc., and certain ethnic groups as well. So we just need to be very, very mindful of that we're not creating an underclass of digitally excluded people.
I completely agree, and it was great to have the libraries involved, because the libraries have a role to play, as do the community centres with some of those solutions. So bringing them on board is really important to resolving those issues, and making sure that when we're elderly, which I probably am, that we can keep up with we don't become digitally excluded, because you need to keep that learning up at the pace of the digital technology.
So,
thanks. Yes, I admire this planning, having that breadth. So from the basic skills and the community level population ambition at one end through to the high level skills, and the skill shortage tackling that we've known about for a while at the other end. And I just wanted to sort of mention the work that colleagues have done at Leeds Beckett. I think they've been one of the pioneers in the digital bootcamp area, and it's good to see that kind of shining through from this, that has really given opportunities to people to get into that industry with those skills. And I also wondered whether we can be quite savvy here, because if we are looking at graduate retention type of projects within the employment and skills brief, then the kind of exchange of ideas and knowledge between a young graduate and kind of their bosses who might be several generations older is quite a powerful thing, and you can kind of kill two birds there by introducing the natural digital natives, if that's the right word, into a company and helping them to teach the rest of us, if we're not already kind of up to that level.
I couldn't agree with you more, Sue. I think a lot of people around the table will know I'm really supportive of a West Yorkshire graduate programme. I think that could add a lot of value. To give an example, it was an apprentice actually rather than a graduate in our business. Our checking time was an hour and a half on a component. We bought a new piece of equipment, gave it to a time-served engineer and asked him to use that equipment to check the part, and he saved 15 minutes. That's a lot in manufacturing. I gave it to a 17-year-old apprentice and said, you've got 2 weeks with that piece of kit. Can you see what you can do? And he took that checking time down from 90 minutes to 90 seconds. I think the more young people we get into a business, but not show them the way we do things, but ask them how they would do things, then maybe the more wins we'll get.
Okay, Martin?
I'm going to be a bit controversial here. No matter what we do, we're going to leave people behind. It's human nature, and it's a case of we've only got so much money, and we need to target the best opportunity. We need to identify that and go forward, and then hopefully at a later date we might be able to do something for the other 20%, but it's human nature.
Can
Any
I
more
counter
comments before I become controversial? Liz? Right?
I think there are things we can do that go beyond the money, and that's our level of influence. How do we influence some of the larger corporate employers to take their corporate social responsibility seriously? So we saw from the pandemic that some kids couldn't learn at home because they didn't have a laptop or a tablet. Are there opportunities for businesses to step in and support that agenda to make the resource go further? And I think in an influencing role we may be able to ensure that nobody's left behind, or as fewer people as possible are left behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? Just listen to everybody. I think and one of the priorities for Tracy is equality and diversity and inclusion, and I just really need to understand the data and the statistics under item 5, around 23% and 4% and 5%. They're just numbers. I actually need to feel what we're talking about, and I think we can endorse this. But if they really genuinely want our feedback, I really need to understand what that means and what it means. I take your point, Martin, that we've only got a limited amount of money, But one of the things I do is I'm always continuously battling in my authority, precisely the point you're making, because, you know, we have to really make sure that we do actually hit the nail on the head. So although, you know, I welcome the report, and if the point you made, Fatra, right, that we just need to understand the granular detail to actually make that biggest impact. Otherwise, we're going to, and especially now, and, you know, we've just been through a pandemic, and we were also, you know, saying that, oh God, you know, it's shining a light on the things we know, and you know, the most vulnerable in our society, who were the frontline workers, people who don't have a choice to actually work from home, people who actually put themselves in harm's way, were the people who actually sort of like, you know, dying basically, and people like us, myself included, you know, I had the luxury of sort of like, you know, waking up from sitting on my computer on my laptop and doing meetings online for months, although I hated it. I'm really glad I'm back, but on a serious note, we do really need to actually understand what it means. And I mentioned we've got a NHS crisis and a public health crisis, and if you don't have a healthy, vibrant population, then your productivity is going to go out the window. You know, so we really do need to actually hit this on the head. So I think we need to do some work, maybe a separate piece of work, in terms of what the data is actually saying to us, you know, and how can we make that big impact. Because, you know, the numbers might be small, but the numbers might be small, but the impact is massive. So on that note, if you can just take that away, we just need to sort of like think about this. But in terms of the report and the recommendations, I think I'd be minded to actually agree with the recommendations, if that's okay with members.
Can I just echo that, Chair, very quickly? I just echo that.
Yeah.
I was just going to say,
we don't want to make big speeches right here, but very quickly.
Not at all, Chair. I'm shy and retiring, as you know. But I understand the point that Martin's making, and it's one that challenges all macro policy making forums because of the finite resources. And what we tend to do is just have a blanket strategy and captures as many as we can. But key to the change and key to making it realistic for us to hit as many as we can is that notion of political will and understanding and you know, and genuine intention to, you know, to learn and do better. And I think, you know, we've heard that today. We've heard that by some of the papers that, you know, and that clear intent for inclusivity and in that growth and EDI. So I think it's about working smarter. I think it's about having that genuine intention to reach out and build new relationships so that we can make that resource spread a lot further, and that's what gives us hope, to be honest. Yeah?
Thanks, Carl. Are we okay to move on? Okay, we're now moving into item 12, which is part of the excluded agenda. So have you got anybody in the audience who now wishes to leave? I'm being putting it politely. Have we got any media around? No? Are there all officers?
I think it's all officers, but it's also the online.
Yeah, just...
So online we'll have to come offline, or won't we?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you very much for watching. And now we are going to go offline because under our protocols, this item is now excluded from the public. So thank you for watching. And hopefully you'll join us again next time. Thank you.
You have time for the ads before the next.
Let's wait for it.